Tool safety and accessibility is a huge part of your craft, so let's make this tool portfolio together. Start the project by preparing the leather. Cut, punch holes, and edge finish. Additionally, if you are using strap keepers, install the leather staples. You can buy these keepers pre-made or buy the staples, check the description for a link. Install is easy, simply pressing the tines through and bending the bar inward on the flesh side. Next, you'll have 2 snap tabs, 1 handle grip, 2 long straps, and 1 handle. Despite there being 2 pictured, we'll discuss that in a moment. And finally, 1 large body piece. A quick tip for some of our beginners and more experienced crafters: make sure when you're choosing the section of your leather you're cutting your pieces from that it's not too stretchy and will hold its shape. The reason the previous section had 2 straps cut was because one was cut from the wrong part of the hide and I had to go back and recut it. So be very diligent and aware of where you're cutting from. For this step, we're going to be starting to set the hardware. I want to point out here that you have 2 different options when it comes to how you're going to install these pieces. You can either use the strap keeper with a buckle that has no center bar, or use a center bar buckle that effectively has a built-in strap keeper. If you are using the center bar, you do not need to make the strap keepers, whereas with a non-center bar buckle, you will need to make sure to have those available when you go to set them if you don't want your strap flapping around. Start by grabbing your buckle and making sure that it is oriented correctly when installing. You want the tongue to be facing upward and laying flat. If you install this backwards or upside down, you will have trouble later when you go to use your strap and the buckle in. So you want to make sure right now that you have it oriented correctly before you set your rivet. Again, take a look at that tongue and make sure that it's facing the correct direction and oriented down toward the rest of the buckle frame. Once you have it oriented the way that you'd like, grab your rivets. The thickness of your leather is going to determine which rivet you need to use. Get your cap, anvil, setter, and mallet, and get that set. For the next step, we'll be installing the caps on our snaps. The snaps are going on the long straps right in the center. There are 3 holes, so you want to make sure that you're using the correct ones. You will leave an empty hole facing down toward the billet of these straps. Then you'll push your post through, grab your socket on the back, and set these in your anvil. Again, leave that hole at the billet end. We will be using that later when we build the rest of the strap set. Put your cap into your anvil using the appropriately sized hole. Get your snap setter and go ahead and set these. Now, some people like to do a little bit of a wobble around while they set them, and some people like to set them straight down. You try both and choose which one works best for you. I like to do the wobble round. It really just depends on your preference. Set all 4 of these snaps and we'll move on to the next step. We're going to start building the handle. While you don't need to use an adhesive to put these in place, I do tend to find it makes things stay where they need to be a little bit more easily. So I fold both of these pieces to get the center to make sure that when I line them up and put them together, I'm getting an equal amount of leather on both sides. Using that center mark that I've got, I'm going to put adhesive on the grain side of the handle strap and the flesh side of the rest of the handle piece. This is a contact cement, so give it a few minutes to get tacky and then stick those pieces together. Once they've been stuck together for a couple of minutes, I like to use a poly roller to be able to really adhere them to the best of my ability before I move on to the next step. Now let's take a thin layer of adhesive and put it across all of the area on the strap and the handle piece, as we will be flipping up the sides to meet in the middle of the strap piece to create our handle. Once the adhesive is on there, flip the tabs inside and spend a couple of minutes forming the handle and making sure that both pieces lay flat using your poly roller and your hands to really mold that into the shape that you're looking for. Once the adhesive is dry and you have the shape that you would like for your handle, using an awl or a wing divider, mark where your stitching holes are going to be, and then using your stitching chisel, go ahead and knock those holes out. You can use whatever stitch you prefer, but we recommend a saddle stitch to sew these two lines up, and your handle will be ready to go. For the final steps in the assembly of the handle, we are going to take these straps and rivet them to the handle pieces. You'll do this by wrapping the ends of the handle around the straps and using the hole that we left behind to rivet those all together. Again, the thickness of your leather is going to determine what length of post you need for your rivets, so choose according to whatever material you are building from. Press the post from the bottom through the loop of the strap, through the strap, and then up through the top of the handle. Place your cap on top, your anvil underneath, and go ahead and set those rivets on both sides. Just a note, you do have some customization options here. Shown on screen is another version of this that was made with a sewing machine and with the buckles that included the strap keepers. Several parts of this project along the way, you can make decisions about how you want to construct your project. There's a lot of flexibility here, so you can create the exact tool portfolio that will work for you with the materials you prefer. Continuing with our hardware setting, we're going to set the other half of our snaps in the snap tab. Pushing the post through and putting the eyelet on top, we'll go ahead and set these directly on the granite. You don't need the anvil for these because they have a flat back. Again, you can go directly down or do the little wobbly bit. Either way, get those set in and we'll move on. For the final hardware, we'll be installing all 8 of the grommets. Grommets are installed by putting a post through the hole and then a backing, which is then set in an anvil set specifically for that hardware. So as shown here, post through into the anvil, grab your setter right on top and knock that down and roll the post. Continue with all 8 and we'll move on to the next step. To prepare the leather for the next step, we're going to form the bottom flap by using our poly roller to create a crease in the bottom where we'll be sewing all of the pockets for our tools. So use the pattern to determine where that line is going to be and roll the poly back and forth. Next, we're going to install the snap tabs using the pattern to determine where those are located. I've got a piece of double-sided tape on them that I use to go ahead and stick that down on the body piece. Please note, if you are machine sewing this project, if you don't have the correct foot, you will struggle to sew around these snaps and you may have to sew these by hand no matter what. So once you get them attached, use a stitching chisel and mark out your holes and pre-punch those, or get them on your machine and go ahead and sew around those. Once those are installed, we'll move on to our next step. The purpose of these snap tabs is to make the handle detachable for when you're hanging it in your shop. In this next step, we're going to start picking which tools are going to go into this tool portfolio. There's a few things to consider. Some of the tools that have these bulbous bases are a little bit difficult to fit in or take up more space. Some things like the skiver are significantly taller than other tools. And the amount of space that the width or height of the head of those tools is going to take up is also going to determine whether or not they fit. So start picking those tools and we'll talk about how to make our pockets. In order to prepare this, we want to roll the top down. So we're going to use a poly roller to roll the top, at which point we'll be able to determine which tools are too tall and which ones will fit inside this finished project. So roll your top down and using that poly roller just like we did on the base, roll it across to create a crease to show us where our top and bottom flap end. From this point, you can see that the project folds in half, and then the straps will wrap around the entire body of the project to create the safe space that your tools will be stored in. Once you get your buckles strapped up and you flip the project over, you'll be able to use the handle to carry these flat to make sure they don't fall out or jostle around when you are using them. This project offers a lot of flexibility. You can use the pattern holes indicated to create the pockets inside of your tool portfolio, or you can determine the spacing yourself depending on the tools you want to store. At this point, your project is complete. Fill it with the tools that you want to be able to carry or keep safe and keep your workspace clean and organized. You can carry this, keeping it super mobile, or detach the strap handles and hang it from the pegboard in your workspace. Either way, keep your tools protected and keep crafting. We'll see you next time.